"Get this man out. He clearly doesn't belong here." The words sliced through the velvet silence of the auction hall. A hush rippled across the room, sharper than any gavel. Dozens of heads turned. The chandeliers above flickered, like even the light hesitated. At the center of the storm stood a black Manquillet, composite, his hands still clasped behind his back. He didn't flinch, didn't speak. The woman who shouted the auction coordinator, draped in silk like a flag of pedigree, pointed a manicured finger as if she were ordering a stain to be scrubbed clean. "Sir," she said again, her voice louder now, "this is a private auction. You're not on the guest list." He was, but no one bothered to check. A guard approached from the side wall, slow and deliberate, as whispers started filling the room like smoke. A man in a navy suit chuckled under his breath. Probably wandered in from the kitchen. He muttered, not quietly enough. In that moment, all the opulence turned hostile gold-framed paintings, glass display cases, the scent of tuberose and polished silver. It wasn't just about jewels. It was about power. And who didn't look like they had it? He stood beneath a golden spotlight, but to them, he was invisible. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like the walls wanted you out? A girl near the back started filming on her phone. Just a few seconds. Just enough to catch the man's silence and the woman's authority. The kind of clip that goes viral for all the wrong reasons. Still, he said nothing, but his eyes scanned the hall, not nervously, not even defensively, almost like he was waiting. And that's when the security guard reached him. "Sir," the guard said, softer than expected, "please don't make this difficult." He glanced up at the guard, calm. "I'm not here to make trouble," he said, "just here for one item." That should have been the end of it, but something in the way he said it made the room fall even quieter. One item. No one knew what he meant, but they were about to find out. Have you ever seen someone so calm under pressure it made you question everything you thought about them? And more important, life you were in his place. Would you walk out in silence or stay and fight? Because next, you'll see exactly what he did. And that wasn't even the worst part. He didn't move. The security guard hovered beside him, one hand just inches from his radio. The woman in charge stepped closer now, her heels ticking on marble like a countdown. "You can either leave," she said through gritted teeth, "or be escorted." He turned, slowly. "I came for one piece," he said again. "Lot 214. The auctioneer, an older man in a velvet blazer, froze mid-sentence, head swiveled. Lot 214 wasn't just any piece. It was the center of tonight's buzz. A rare platinum necklace, once owned by royalty. Starting bid 6 figures. The woman scoffed. "You?" Her voice dripped with disbelief. "Do you know how this works?" He didn't answer, but inside something shifted. Because this wasn't the first time someone assumed he didn't belong. He had been 14 the first time. He was followed in a store. 22 when a client laughed at his name. 30 when a hotel manager asked if he was the driver. Every insult quiet or loud stacked like bricks. But he never fought them. Until now. Because this piece wasn't just about value. It was about his mother. She never wore diamonds, said love should be simple. But before she passed, she once pointed at a necklace in a magazine and whispered that one feels like dignity. Tonight, he wasn't bidding for attention. He came to buy back something that looked like the woman who raised him. Have you ever felt like the world tried to erase someone you love just because of where they came from? He looked around. Not one hand offered help. Not one face showed shame. Just silence. And then a low voice echoed from the balcony above. "Wait." All heads turned. A sharply dressed man in a navy 3-piece suit descended the staircase. His presence pulled the room taut like a string. "There's been a mistake," the man said. "He's not just on the list, he's a priority guest." The woman paled. The guard stepped back, but the man didn't smile. He simply nodded, as if to say, "It's not over." Because it wasn't. Stick around. Because next I'll tell you who the man really was and what he knew that left half the room trembling. Have you ever been underestimated so badly it became your advantage? Drop a word below if you felt it, just one word that still stings. He hadn't been called a priority guest in years. Back then, he didn't have titles or suits tailored in London or a name that echoed in boardrooms. He had a cracked phone, second-hand shoes, and a mother who believed he could become anything if he learned to stay quiet. But dignity isn't quiet, not when it's been stomped on your whole life. He grew up 3 blocks from a pawn shop, 6 blocks from eviction. On weekends, while other kids played ball, he watched his mom count coupons, whispering prayers over boiling rice. The first time he saw her cry wasn't after losing money. It was when a jewelry clerk told her, "This store isn't for people like you." She never walked into another one again. He was 12, and he promised himself something that day. One day I'll buy the entire store. He didn't know how, didn't even know what leverage meant, but something about the clerk's voice etched itself deep into his chest, so deep that years later, even in million-dollar meetings, that same rage still flickered behind his eyes. That night, after the auction incident, it came back. In Lot 214, it wasn't just platinum and gemstones. It was her grace, her restraint, her refusal to raise her voice, even when the world raised its hand against her. Can a necklace carry memory? Can a piece of metal speak louder than all the times you stayed silent? As the man in the navy suit whispered to the auctioneer, the crowd began murmuring. He stood in the center, still silent, but his hands had started to tremble, not with fear, with purpose. He wasn't here to prove he had money. He was here to reclaim something taken long ago. And just when the tension in the room seemed to settle, a familiar voice rang out from across the hall. Well, didn't expect to see you here." It was the CEO of a rival firm, a man who'd once tried to erase his career with a single leaked email. And he was walking straight toward him. Have you ever had your past walk back into the room right when you thought you'd moved on? Because what happened next would push the entire auction to the edge of chaos. Well, didn't expect to see you here." His voice was smooth, like a blade dipped in honey. The crowd parted as the man approached Chettle, silver-haired, draped in arrogance. He was wearing a sapphire pin, a symbol of old money and closed circles. And everyone in the room knew who he was. Preston Lorne, CEO of Lorne and Worthington, collector of power, and the man who once tried to blacklist him from every auction house on the East Coast. "You're still into shiny things," Preston sneered. "I figured after last year you'd be keeping a low profile." The room didn't move. The auctioneer froze mid-sentence. The security guard stiffened. And the black man? Still standing, still silent. But his jaw. Preston circled him like a lion testing a cage. "Tell me, are you here to bid? Or just to stir memories?" Someone near the back chuckled. Another whispered, "Wait, is that who I think it is?" Phones came out again, but this time no one was sure which side to stand on. Preston raised his voice. "It's cute, really. You show up here, dressed like success, but we both know what you really are." That was the crack. The crowd shifted. People whispered. A woman in a gold gown turned away, uncomfortable. He looked at Preston, measured, quiet. "Funny," he said, finally. "I was thinking the same thing about you." And just like that, the room felt like it tilted. Have you ever seen someone weaponize silence better than a scream? The woman from earlier, the one who tried to kick him out, looked between the two men now, unsure who to obey. Prestige had shifted. Preston narrowed his eyes. "Let's make it interesting then," he said. "If you're really here to bid, let's see how long you last." He turned and walked off, but not before smirking to the auctioneer. Make sure he can actually pay. Mockery in plain sight. But the next 5 minutes would silence every doubt. Before I tell you what he revealed in front of the entire auction, I know you might be busy. Maybe you've got errands to run, or maybe your mind can only handle so much drama at once. But if stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how it all unfolds. Because what he did next left Preston stunned, and the entire crowd breathless. The auctioneer cleared his throat twice. "Lot 214, he finally announced, eyes darting between Preston and the man still standing center stage, opening bid $120,000. A murmur ran through the room. Even for this crowd, the number carried weight. Preston didn't wait. He lifted his paddle lazily. 150. Gasps. A few turned to look at the man Preston had just humiliated. Would he back down? Would he walk out? But he didn't even blink. He raised his hand, slow and precise. 200. The silence that followed was colder than the marble underfoot. Have you ever been in a room where your very existence felt like a protest? Because that's what this was now. A battle over more than a necklace. A room filled with whispered legacies suddenly holding its breath as the outsider refused to fold. Preston narrowed his eyes. 250, he said, louder now. The crowd stirred. This wasn't bidding. It was war. The man stepped forward, no smile, no theatrics. 300. Someone at the back let out a quiet damn. And that's when the system pushed back. A woman in a black pantsuit auction house's director hurried to the auctioneer and whispered something sharp. The mic cut off. A delay. Then came the voice over the PA system. We'll need to verify all funds for bids exceeding standard thresholds. Preston leaned against a pillar, smug. Oh, he said, just loud enough. I'm sure they just need to make sure this gentleman is a thou shall I put I'd overreaching. A few people chuckled. Others looked away. The man stepped toward the podium, calm. I came prepared, he said. You'll find the account ending in 0036 is pre-approved for $2 million. The woman blinked. He continued, voice steady. And if you're unsure, call Geneva. Geneva, the headquarters. Now people were whispering names, positions, possibilities. Was he bluffing? Or worse, telling the truth? Have you ever had someone question your worth in front of everyone and still hold your head high? Because what happened when they made that phone call was the beginning of the end. And Preston, he didn't even realize. He just stepped into a trap. The room waited. The woman from the auction staff walked stiffly to the side, dialing. Her voice was low, but every pair of eyes tracked her every word. 1 minute passed, then 2. No one moved. Preston tapped his shoe against the marble floor. Tick, tick, tick. He was smirking again, but it looked more forced now, like someone bluffing on a busted hand. Then the woman returned, eyes wide, pulse visible at her neck. She leaned toward the auctioneer and whispered just 3 words. The mic clicked back on. We confirmed the funds, the auctioneer said, his voice tighter now, and full executive clearance from Geneva. Bidder 0036 is authorized without limit. Without limit? The phrase dropped like a bomb. You could feel the shift, the crowd's mood, the posture of the guards. Even the scent in the airless, expensive perfume now. More nervous sweat. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't named his company. But somehow everyone felt smaller. Preston tried to recover. Well, he chuckled. Good for you. I suppose they're handing out hedge fund accounts to anyone these days. He was spiraling, and people could see it. A woman in the front row lowered her sunglasses and stared at the black man differently now, as if trying to match him to a Forbes list in her head. He didn't look at Preston. Didn't need to. Instead, he walked to the front, stood beside the podium, and calmly reached into his pocket. A single black card. Not American Express. A private issuance. Matte finish. Gold etching. He laid it on the velvet platform. Run it now. For the full amount. The room gasped. Even the staff flinched. Because only a handful of institutions in the world issued the card. Preston's smirk disappeared. He stepped back. But the black man, he finally looked up. And for the first time that night, he smiled. Not because he won, but because he didn't need to prove anything anymore. Have you ever seen someone flip a room without saying a single cruel word? The necklace wasn't on his neck yet, but the crown, everyone already saw it. Stick around because what he did after claiming lot to 114 wasn't just personal. It was political, and it shook the entire industry. The velvet beneath the card shimmered under the auction lights. The silence it brought wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of silence that comes before an earthquake still charged, waiting to split the room in half. The auctioneer didn't even touch the card. He just stared at it, then at the man who placed it down so effortlessly. A man who, 10 minutes ago, they were seconds from escorting out. Now no one dared to speak unless he blinked first. The black card wasn't just a symbol of wealth. It was an artifact, only issued to the few whose net worth came with real influence. Not just money but voting power, ownership, the ability to move markets with a whisper. Preston adjusted his collar. His smile was gone. The woman who tried to kick him out earlier, she had vanished from the front of the room. No apology, just absence. He turned, slowly, scanning the room, not in arrogance, but in clarity. These weren't just strangers now. They were witnesses. Have you ever felt every pair of eyes shift not because you changed, but because their perception did? He looked back at the necklace, lot 214, still untouched, still gleaming in its display box, like a quiet symbol of everything he came to reclaim. Then, for the first time, he spoke directly to the room. "Withdraw all other bids." Gasps. The auctioneer stammered, "Yes, sir." He didn't raise his voice. "I'll pay triple. No competition." The crowd broke into a hum shock, envy, confusion. He turned back toward Preston, who now looked as if he'd swallowed something sharp. "I came here for one thing," he said, "and I'm leaving with it. But you..." He let that sentence hang, unfinished, heavy, because it wasn't just about a necklace anymore. It was about legacy, control, and the uncomfortable truth that the room had just witnessed. The man they judged owned the rules. They tried to play him by. Have you ever seen power arrive so quietly? It felt like gravity shifting. What he revealed next about the company running the auction itself left even the auctioneer trembling. And that's where it gets terrifying. Triple the price. The auction director stepped back in, her voice tight, controlled, but her hands betrayed her. One clenched behind her clipboard, knuckles white. "We can't simply cancel the bidding process mid-auction," she said. "There are policies, procedures." He tilted his head slightly, not aggressive, just enough to make her question her next word. "I understand," he said. "Let's follow them, then." He stepped closer to the podium, placed both hands lightly on its edge. "Shall I read you your own policy manual? Section 12.3, Asset Override Rights, page 47. She blinked, hard. People in the audience were now fully tuned in. The whispering had stopped. What kind of guest memorizes auction policy? Then she asked the question that exposed everything. "How do you know that clause?" He paused. Then he smiled. "I wrote it." You could feel the air suck out of the room. Phones went back up, but not to mock, to document. Because in that single sentence, everything snapped into focus. He wasn't just a bidder. He was behind the architecture, the infrastructure, the rules. Have you ever watched someone dismantle a system by reminding it who built it? Preston muttered something under his breath, stepped toward the exit but stopped halfway, because someone else was walking in. A woman in a deep emerald pantsuit, flanked by two assistants, stern, composed, the CEO of the parent company behind the auction house. She walked straight to the podium, nodded to the man. "Sir," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we didn't know you'd be attending in person. Your discretion is appreciated." Then she turned to the crowd. "For those unaware, this gentleman is not only a founding investor of Valor Holdings but a board-level advisor." The crowd froze. The director who tried to block his bid, she looked like a statue cracking from the inside out. And Preston? He was already gone. Have you ever witnessed a reversal so public it echoed like thunder through velvet halls? Because what happened next wasn't just about shame. It was about what he did with his power. And it made the industry tremble. No one sat down. The CEO of Valor Holdings hadn't even finished her sentence. And already people were reaching for their phones not to scroll, but to search. They were Googling him and finding out far too late. His name, his investments, his silent stake in half the institutions that once shut their doors in his face. But he wasn't looking at them. He walked toward the display where lot 214 rested quiet, radiant, untouched. The necklace shimmered beneath glass like it had waited years just to come home. He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a single document. Thick stock, embossed seal. He handed it to the auctioneer without a word. The auctioneer read it, eyes widened, then looked up, stunned. This is a transfer of controlling shares. He couldn't finish the sentence. The CEO of Valor Holdings stepped closer, read over his shoulder, and her breath hitched. The room leaned forward, because what he'd just handed over wasn't just proof of purchase. It was ownership. He wasn't bidding for a necklace. He had just finalized the acquisition of the entire auction house. And not today. Not tonight. The papers were dated to weeks ago. He'd walked in already owning everything. Everyone had played a game in a house he already controlled. Have you ever seen humiliation wrapped in velvet? Preston was gone. The director's chair stood empty. Even the guards avoided his gaze now, unsure if they were still supposed to protect or apologize. But he didn't gloat. He turned to the auctioneer. "Deliver lot 214 to this address," he said, sliding over a card. Then he looked to the crowd calm, measured. "For the record," he said, "I never came to prove anything. I just came to keep a promise." He turned and walked out. Not a sound behind him, only the soft creak of legacy shifting its weight. Have you ever seen a room realize it was never in control all along? But that wasn't the end. Because outside waiting by a town car under amber lights was someone no one had noticed yet. And what she said to him changed everything again. The glass doors whispered shut behind him. Cool night air kissed his face as he stepped onto the marble steps. The buzz of the auction house faded behind him. No more whispers, no more judgment. Just silence. But not peace. Because parked at the curb, beneath a soft amber street lamp, stood a woman, older, poised, wearing a cream coat, pearl earrings, and holding a small leather box. He slowed, and for the first time all evening his expression cracked. "Miss Delacroix." She nodded. His mother's closest friend. Once the only woman who dared confront the nurse when the hospital misplaced his mother's chart. Once the only person who ever dared to say she deserved better. He stepped closer. Delacroix opened the box. Inside, a necklace, but not lot 114. Smaller, simpler, tarnished with age. She wore this the day she gave that interview. She whispered, the one about dignity. His hand hovered over it, then pulled back. Too fragile, too real. "She would have been proud of what you did tonight," Delacroix said. "But she would have asked you one question." He looked at her. "What will you do with it now?" He didn't answer. Not yet. Behind him, the auction house buzzed back to life, staff whispering apologies, executives scrambling to issue press statements, phones ringing off the hook as news of the acquisition began to spread. Preston, already trending for all the wrong reasons. And inside the building, chairs were being reset, podiums repositioned. But no one remembered who was next to bid, because the room wasn't thinking about art anymore. It was thinking about him. Have you ever seen power so quiet it made noise even after it left the room? And for the people who once whispered in judgment tonight, they whispered something else. Respect, awe, maybe even regret. But him, he took the necklace, closed the box gently, and got into the car. Because he wasn't done. What he did next wouldn't just change one auction house. It would send shockwaves through every boardroom in the industry. And the way he started? By inviting the public in, for free. The next morning, headlines swarmed the internet. Private auction acquired overnight by anonymous investor. Jewelry house CEO steps down after public power shift. Who was the man behind lot 214? But he didn't read them. He was already inside the building. Not the one with chandeliers and tuxedos. A community arts center, small, underfunded. The kind of place his mother used to pass by and say, "Someone should make this beautiful again." He stood in front of the main harbor walls, flickering lights, and nodded once, then handed the director a folded document. She opened it. It was a deed. The entire building. Donated, upgraded, funded indefinitely, with one condition. Every month, one item from the private collection must be displayed here, free to the public. Lot 214 would be the first. Because some beauty doesn't belong behind glass and velvet ropes. Some stories are meant to be touched. Have you ever realized that real power isn't about who gets to own more but who gets to give more? Outside, reporters waited, but he didn't speak. Not yet. Inside, a group of students arrived for an after-school program, most unaware of who he was or what he'd done. But one little girl stopped, pointed at the display case being unboxed, and whispered, "It's so shiny." He smiled, not the smile of a winner, the smile of a son who kept a promise. Because that necklace didn't belong to the elite, it belonged to her, to every woman who walked out of a store feeling less than, to every child who thought success had a skin tone, to every man who held his breath in a room full of suits and refused to shrink. Have you ever stood in a place that once rejected you and rebuilt it into a door for others? Because what he did next wasn't for cameras, it was for legacy. But before the world could even catch up, Simeon made a call. And what they uncovered wasn't just a power move. It was a buried truth someone tried hard to erase. The phone call came from a former employee. Anonymous, nervous, but clear. "There's something you need to see," the voice said. "It's about the original records about who really owned Lot 214 before it went to auction." He almost didn't listen, but something in the voice, shaky, urgent, almost apologetic, made him pause. 2 hours later, he sat in a quiet room, across from a banker with trembling hands and a folder marked confidential. Inside, old transfer papers, notarized signatures, dates that didn't add up, and a name, his mother's. She wasn't just someone who admired the necklace from a distance. She once owned it. Lot 214 hadn't been bought by royalty. It had been repossessed, sold behind closed doors during a wrongful foreclosure back when his family had nothing. When the system saw them as invisible, they'd taken it from her. They'd put it behind glass and auctioned it off. And no one had ever told him. Have you ever realized that something you fought for once belonged to you all along? He sat in silence. No anger, just something deeper. An ache only legacy can touch. She never told him. Maybe because she didn't want him to carry the bitterness. Or maybe because she always knew he'd find it again. And now he had. Not through rage, not through revenge, but through clarity, through choice. He looked at the folder, then closed it, because now the story was complete. He stood, walked out, and let the sun hit his face. The city moved around him fast, loud, distracted. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was chasing anything. He'd arrived. The boy who was once asked to leave now owned the keys. And as the final shot lingers on that necklace, seen no longer under glass, but resting softly around the neck of a young girl, walking through the art center, only truth settles in. Sometimes dignity isn't something you buy back. It's something you were never supposed to lose. Have you ever felt like the end of a story was really just the beginning? If you stayed through all 12 parts, thank you. But tell me this, what would you reclaim if no one could stop you?